Hey everyone, welcome back to the You're Not Finished podcast. My name is Brittany Franklin and I'm the host of this podcast, and it has taken me much longer than I wanted to have a new episode out for you guys due to finals week, a lot of anxious feelings about school and just life in general. But regardless of that, I want to sincerely apologize for taking so long. To be honest though, really didn't want to record a new episode until I felt mentally ready to do so. So I just took the time I needed to give the best effort I could to this. I'm going to jump into things without giving an intro, but before I do that, I want to give a trigger warning. I will briefly mention suicide in this episode, so if that negatively affects your mental or emotional health, please refrain from listening today or listen with caution. So my family and I had a discussion on multiple subjects a couple of weeks ago, and there were a couple of key points that were made during that conversation that kind of struck a chord with me, and if I'm honest, remind me of part of the reason why I have felt disconnected from the church and the body of Christ in general for the last couple of years. For privacy purposes, I'm obviously not going to go into much detail, but I'm just going to summarize these points really quickly and then go from there. So the first point is that we are the church. Now, if you don't know what that means, it's exactly how it sounds, but I'll give a little bit more context for what that means in a little bit. And then the second point is that it's not the church's job to do certain things or provide certain needs for people, essentially because you are there to serve anyway. So for the first point, I agree that we are the church, and that the definition of the church doesn't just mean the building or the organization which Christians gather and worship and fellowship in. We as Christians should be carrying the word and the Spirit of God everywhere we go, so it can be freely given to whoever we're supposed to give it to. The second belief, though, that we go to church primarily to serve and that it's not the church's job to do certain things, kind of bothered me a little bit for a couple of reasons. Before I get into that, I want to say that I don't believe that you should go into anything with a primarily self-serving attitude or thinking about what you're going to get out of any person or place or thing, right? But in the context of the church, there are some people who are meant to serve in one way or another in the context of ministry or whatever. And then there are people in life who, for whatever reason, don't have the physical, mental, or emotional capacity to serve others in the way that might be needed and will look for solace and support through the church. Are we going to say to those kind of people, like, hey, you're not able-bodied or you're not willing to serve in the church, so therefore you're not welcome? Of course not. We're not going to say that. I don't know if you've heard the saying that the church is a hospital for the broken, but you can't really believe that or follow the command to love our neighbor, but then neglect or invalidate specific kinds of brokenness by saying it's not the church's job to do X, Y, or Z. To be honest, it's much easier to say that it's not the church's job to do these things rather than just admit that your church in particular, or maybe even most churches in general, just may not have the knowledge, time, resources, money, or even the heart to help somebody in need, especially when it comes to mental health. An example of this is I went to a church for an extended period of time. I'm not going to name that church, but I was there for maybe 10 years on and off, probably more, where one of the members who was very active in serving that church tragically died by suicide. And after their death, they were never mentioned publicly again. And mental health matters for the time that I was there either were addressed under the radar or not addressed at all. And at that same church, when it came to my depression and anxiety, if I would express anything about that, I would just receive prayer, be encouraged to pray more, and then be sent on my way. even some members of my own Christian family, I mean, I love them very much, but they're just terrible at dealing with things pertaining to mental and emotional health. In my experience, it's just been very disheartening to hear about and deal with Christians who overly spiritualize, ignore, or even demonize mental health issues, yet are super passive about it. I think it's actually contradictory. Then you have the other side of things where I attended a different church where the pastor not only frequently and publicly acknowledged various issues of the mind, they also connected with licensed therapists in order to offer free therapy and counseling appointments for the congregants. I even went to a few appointments through them myself and got a lot of healing through it. I just think it's crazy how there's such a huge contrast between two churches that are literally 20 minutes away from each other, and they subscribe to the same belief and the same God. This is why I believe that there are just some Christian organizations and churches that need to go ahead and just be honest about what they can and cannot do. And for what they cannot do, then it's time for them to make the best attempt that they can to partner with those who can do it. I do want to note that even as a Christian myself, I don't expect the church or a Christian organization to meet all my needs, especially when it comes to mental health. That's just impossible because you have humans running these organizations, imperfect humans at that. And it's just flat out unwise based on personal experience and knowledge. I do believe that going to church is about connection to God and others through worship, teaching, and service, or at least it should be. But I also know that you don't have to go to church to do that. But the church can and should be a resource for those who are in need, especially when you have Bible verses like 1 Corinthians 12, which talks about God creating the body so that all its members can care for one another. Or you have biblical characters like Job, Elijah, and even Jesus going through mental and emotional turmoil and distress. And so it just makes me wonder why these issues aren't addressed more often and why there seems to be such a minimal effort in a general sense or on a grander scale to make mental health care or connection to the mental health field a priority. Before I end this episode, I just want to send a quick message to Christian churches, organizations, and people who subscribe to Christianity, who continue to neglect mental health issues, especially. If you don't have the knowledge or the time or the resources or the money or the heart to help people who are in need, then you got to ask God for it. You got to go get it, or you have to connect to a trusted group or organization who does have the knowledge and the time and the resources and all of those things. I mean, my thought for this is if we are the church, or since we are the church, then technically that means that it is our job as the multicultural and multifaceted body of Christ to do X, Y, and Z. And again, if you cannot do it, point people to those who can. I mean, there's really no excuse in 2021. So this episode is going to be really short today. Because it is Mental Health Awareness Month, I will come back with another episode next week. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at YNFinished or on Instagram at YNFcast. Also, go ahead and head over to www.you'renotfinished.com for mental health resources, blogs, and testimonies. I really appreciate you for listening, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.